We have such a deep Catholic heritage, such beautiful churches out here, and we thought we're a rural archdiocese, and so we really wanted to highlight the importance of Catholic rural life in the archdiocese.
A pastor of a group of Iowa churches along the Mississippi River talks about deep spirituality in the heartland as the real presence of Christ travels by boat up the river and then processes onto the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage for miles on foot through the freshly planted farm fields of Iowa. Now, something special and unique to EWTN. For the last year, EWTN News In Depth has been reporting on the National Eucharistic Pilgrimages. In 2024, we provided exclusive coverage of the 4 pilgrimages that came from the 4 corners of the U.S. to the National Eucharistic Congress in Indianapolis in July. Now, in 2025, the last pilgrimage of the 3-year Eucharistic revival, the St. Catherine Drexel route. But never before have we heard from one of our own EWTN friars, a Franciscan missionary of the Eternal Word who himself has taken part in one of these pilgrimages. Viewers of EWTN know Father Joseph Mary Wolfe. He has been with the network for 40 years. He recently took the opportunity to join the St. Catherine Drexel route as it wound its way through the Archdiocese of Dubuque, Iowa, which just so happens to be where Father Joseph grew up on a family farm. Several of his relatives still live and farm in the area. While traveling along with the Blessed Sacrament, he came away with his own pilgrimage experience as he participated in processions, adoration, celebrated Mass, and conducted interviews for the friars' own programming. At Iowa State University, he asked several active young Catholics what their advice is for other young people inspired by the pilgrimage to grow in their faith.
To quote Blessed Carlo, paraphrasing here, but the more time you spend out in the sun, you get tan, but spending time in front of our Lord, especially in the Eucharist, you become saints.
Educating yourself on what it means to be Catholic and what the Catholic faith entails and the responsibility you have as a Catholic is an amazing way of growing deeper.
Plan it intentionally and guard it jealously. Like, don't let anything come in the way of your 15 minutes of prayer, regardless of when it's at in the day.
And we are delighted now to be joined in studio by Father Joseph to share more of his experience along the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage. Father, it's so good to have you here in D.C. Thank you for traveling here after you traveled to Iowa.
Yes.
So tell us about your travels on the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage. What stood out to you?
It was really a highlight of my priesthood, you know, to be able to go back to where I grew up. And interestingly enough, the Archbishop of Dubuque was himself a farm boy from that. And I had a short interview with him as well. We talked about, you know, at the core of our being, we're still farm boys. And that's how we describe ourselves, as Iowa farm boys. But to be there, when I saw that the Eucharistic pilgrimage was going to be passing through that archdiocese, I said, I have to go, you know, I have to be part of this. And really, it was wonderful to meet some of the young clergy. I've been with EWTN for 40 years, so I haven't gotten to know well a lot of the Iowa clergy, but just some remarkable young priests and zealous young people as well.
And to process through the farm fields.
That's right.
With our Lord. In the Archdiocese of Dubuque, the pilgrimage included, as we said, a visit to the Iowa State University's Catholic Center. Tell us more about what you encountered there.
And that's an interesting connection, too. I was actually there last year for my nephew's daughter's baptism.
Oh, wow.
Where that's the parish that he belongs to, and that affected his own life. He wanted to remain a member of that parish because it's really a parish that's on fire. And you saw Father Joseph Sevchik there at the beginning. He was studying at Iowa State, bioengineering and some other things. But because of that Catholic center, his own vocation sprang from that. He told me that many vocations to the Archdiocese of Dubuque come from that Catholic center, because they have a wonderful center where they can get together and have small groups, where they have adoration of the Blessed Sacrament, and just some young people really on fire with the faith.
That's so encouraging. And Father, as we've been talking about, you yourself, you are from Iowa. Even over 20 years ago, you actually hosted a series for EWTN called Faith in the Heartland.
Yes.
And I know that that region to our country is obviously very dear to you, but for many Americans, maybe some viewers, Iowa is considered flyover country.
That's right.
But Father, based on your experiences, what do you think we all can learn from the Catholic faithful who are living in the heartland of America?
You know, I'm so encouraged by just the history of that area. It's a very strong Catholic culture there I grew up in. And part of that is because of the missionaries who came there. These zealous men, like Venerable Samuel Mazzucchelli. He was this Dominican friar who at the age, I think, of 22 came to the New World to be a missionary. And when he was ordained here in Cincinnati, the bishop sends him out 500 miles away. You know, he founds these churches along the Mississippi River Valley. One of those was St. Raphael's in Dubuque, Iowa, which eventually became the cathedral. And then Bishop Loris was the first bishop. Well, when he was appointed there, this was known as the Northwest Territory. It included Iowa, Minnesota, North, South Dakota, and Montana. So it's a huge area, and he has no clergy to do it with. So he goes to France, he brings back 2 priests and 4 subdeacons. That's what he has to work with, is this vast territory. But he was also a friend of John Vianney, and they stayed in touch throughout that. But it was a lot of their zeal that built this Catholic culture there.
And I do feel like the pilgrimage does allow us to learn more about our American Catholic history.
Right.
Father, can you speak more? You said this was a highlight of your priesthood.
Yes.
On a personal note, can you share more of what this journey meant to you?
Yeah, I think just, again, learning more about the history of this whole area and just the zeal of those missionaries, I really grew an appreciation of my background. You know, I had Franciscan sisters who taught me in grade school, and it was just kind of the environment where you learned virtue by working hard on the farm, by living in communities where everybody knows everybody, and you have a care for each other. So there's a real security you had because where you attended church, the spire was the only thing standing, you know, higher than anything else in that little towns that we had. But you knew everybody in that parish, and you felt like you'd always rely on each other. When my own grandfather, my mother's father, was killed tragically in a car accident, well, the harvest hadn't been brought in yet. So the local farmers all got together to bring in the harvest to help her. So that was the kind of attitude that people had.
Community becomes all the more vital.
Right.
It sounds like. You know, as we said, the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage, it will conclude this month on the Solemnity of Corpus Christi in Los Angeles. It officially will mark the end of the 3-year Eucharistic revival here in the United States. Father, what are your thoughts on how this initiative has gone, and what fruit do you anticipate we might see come from it?
I've been excited to see at EWTN too, more young people coming to confession, coming to adoration, because we have adoration 7 days a week there at EWTN. But I think this is one of the things that I'm seeing, that young people are coming to discover this, and older people too, you know, are coming to discover that the Lord remains with us in this profound way in the Blessed Sacrament, and that we can really grow in an intimacy of friendship with Him by spending time with Him in the Blessed Sacrament. You know, the friars, we have this thing we called Outside the Friary. So these are little pieces that we put together of when we're going outside the friary, we're meeting different people. So this coming Wednesday, the friars are going to be posting, it's also going to be on EWTN's Facebook, but the friars' social media as well, a whole compilation of what I experienced, some of the interviews I did, and people get a bigger taste of it, I guess.
Oh, that's excellent. I can't wait to see that. You know, the pilgrimage you walked is named after St. Catherine Drexel, a U.S.-born saint. And it does seem, and we kind of hit on this already, but this Eucharistic pilgrimage, it kind of equips the faithful to learn more about the roots of American Catholicism. I know I traveled on the St. Elizabeth Ann Seton route last year.
Right.
I realized I knew nothing about her. Had you learned more about St. Catherine Drexel, or again, it sounds like you learned a lot more about our American Catholic roots.
What a story! I mean, that she inherits this huge fortune, and how is she going to use it to just enhance her own life? Of course not. She uses it to help the Native American and African American people. And you know, I met this sister. We actually have this beautiful Dominican contemplative community in Marbury, Alabama. One of those sisters knew Catherine Drexel. She was in Nashville at one of their schools, and she said Catherine Drexel would come once a year and she'd look over their work. She wanted to be a nun, but she wanted to be a contemplative. And in Alabama, they started this integrated community in Marbury, which she joined at a very young age. She's now in her 90s, a beautiful soul. But that's one of the souls that Catherine Drexel touched through her work.
And Father, while we have you, you obviously knew EWTN foundress Mother Angelica very well. What did our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament mean to her?
Well, she was a Poor Clare of perpetual adoration, right? So that was their whole life, was adoring our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament. A lot of people don't realize she spent 37 years in adoration of the Blessed Sacrament before EWTN was launched. She entered in 1944, August 15th, to begin a life of adoration. She carried that on. And then when she comes to Irondale, Alabama, again, it's adoration. And then the Lord eventually opens the doors to doing other things as well. But always adoration was at the heart of what she did. And it remains so. So when the sisters moved to the new monastery location, the employees have continued that life of adoration. It's always going to be the heart of EWTN.
Oh, that's beautiful. And obviously, we know
that's right,
it's
front and center.
Exactly,
That's
always.
right.
Father, thank you so much for traveling here and being with us.
Great to be with you.
Thank you.